Today I thought I'd show you a nice technique for starting a watercolour, especially if you want to paint something like a sunset or a sky with a little bit of impact and some drama. So I'll wet the paper all over. I'm using the mist bottle, but you can use a brush, it's fine, but just make sure you don't wet it too much. You don't want the paper to be completely soaked. And I'm looking for a nice even coating of water over the whole sheet, so I've knocked out any large drips just with my hand there. And now I'm going to bring a graded wash down over pretty much the whole sheet, and that's essentially working from one colour and then blending seamlessly down, so there won't be any hard edges where the two colours meet. So I'll start at the top with some ultramarine and some cobalt blue mixed together, and I can leave it ever so slightly patchy. I want the impression of clouds and little bits of light happening in this sky, but still keeping it all very soft and quite subtle effects, hopefully. So bringing in this blue, I can lay it in at an ever so, like a slightest little angle on that as well, and that again will give the impression of little wispy clouds. So varying that mixture, a little bit more cobalt in the mixture now, so the sky is slightly darker towards the top, getting a little bit lighter as I come down. And again, leaving little gaps here and there, tiny little bits of light shining through. Now I've cleaned the brush off and I'll pick up some raw sienna. And now I want to blend these two colours together. So start laying in that raw sienna and then touching it up into where I put the blue. So they're mixing together on the paper. And so the aim is to seamlessly blend these colours together so I don't get a hard edge in between the two. And so it creates that gradation that I'm looking for. Now put a little bit of red into it. It's light red. Tiniest little amount in there really. I don't want this to be too strong. And again, lay that in, and I can very gently drag the brush up into where I've laid in some of that blue and the raw sienna before, and they kind of mix together on the paper and create a nice seamless effect there. So let's bring some more of that raw sienna and light red down. I can bring it all the way down over where the land's going to be as well. So I've essentially created one big wash over the whole sheet without any hard edges, so it's all nicely blended together. Now I've allowed that to settle for really about a minute, no more than that, but just enough so I can now work back into this. And so I've got that graded wash over the whole sheet, and now I can lay in some slightly harder edges and start building up some clouds. So I've got some ultramarine and some burnt sienna, and I've mixed that up quite dark, and the paint is also thicker or drier, if you want to think of it like that, than the wetness on the paper. So it's not going to run too much, and it will hold its own shape. So bringing in a cloud shape, I'm going to bring it in all the way across the sky. I'm not using a reference for this. This is very loosely based on a painting I did a couple of days ago. It's over on my Instagram and my Facebook and all my social media, so if you want to see the painting, go and check that out. So varying that mixture every time I go back, make it slightly darker, and building up this cloud shape, trying to make something fairly interesting. So a little bit of cobalt blue into the mixture now. Quite often I like to make my skies ever so slightly unusual. Don't really want to sort of conform to the white fluffy cloud sort of idea. So try and paint interesting shapes. Hopefully make for a more interesting painting in the end. So I've cleaned the brush off now and I've touched a little bit of light red into that mixture there. So I've greyed it off a touch, also warmed it up a little bit. And I can lay in some smaller shapes now towards the base of this cloud, and hopefully that'll look like it's going off into the distance a little bit more. A little bit more light red. And so laying in some smaller horizontal cloud shapes. And now all the time bearing in mind that I want to add some land underneath this, so make sure I don't come down too low. Now where the paper is slightly damp as well, this paint should soften and should dry a touch lighter as well. I've completely dried that wash now, so I'm going to start working on some land. So I picked up some cobalt blue, a little bit of ultramarine as well, and I'm going to touch that with the tiniest little bit of chromium green oxide, and quite quickly bring in some distance. So suggestion of a distant tree line. Don't need to make too much of this shape at all, it's off in the distance, so no detail, so very simple little mark really is enough to suggest that. And I'll continue that out, bring it all the way across to the left hand side. Now let's grab a little bit of raw sienna. And now I can start laying in the land underneath this distance. I can touch into it and allow it to mix together. Even more raw sienna now. And so getting some variation in the colour and the tone. And building up a wash for this land. I'll go over it with some darker shapes of some trees in a little while. So a little bit more raw sienna, let's touch a bit of cobalt blue, make it a touch darker. Now this is an evening scene, so I want to make the land fairly dark. So it's building up some shadow colour in the land, a little bit of burnt sienna and some cobalt blue in now. So it's getting even darker still as I come right down towards the foreground. So quite slowly really, building up little areas of paint, and every time I go back to the palette I put something else in. So I've got more burnt sienna in there. And so gradually building up this wash, a little bit of ultramarine into that mixture, so darker still. More burnt sienna, more ultramarine, so a tiny little bit darker again. So saving the darkest paint really for down in the foreground there. But again, you have to bear in mind that this will dry a tiny little bit lighter. And so bring this wash all the way down now. And so I've built up a nice little wash there, lots of variation in the colour. Now I've dried that again, and I'm going to bring it all together now with some trees and some silhouetted shapes really to create that impression of evening. So no detail really at all. I've got some blue, some chromium green, a little bit of raw sienna in there. And so let's bring a field in the middle ground and then a little row of trees. We have some of the trees poking up above into the sky, connects the sky and the land. And soften the edge of that as well. And a little bit of cobalt blue, some burnt sienna. So I've mixed this up fairly dark now. I'll start bringing in some tree shapes on the left hand side as well. And again, some of those can poke up into the sky. And this painting is based on a scene that I painted over in my local park a few days ago. And so it's a location I know very well. Let's mix up some really strong dark now. And there's a hedgerow that comes over, lots of little trees and shrubs and all kinds of things going on there. And I don't need to really paint any of that. It's just a series of shapes and dark shapes to give the painting a sense of depth and hopefully a sense of scale. And really it's more about the sky and the atmosphere than any individual object, so I treat everything as simply as I can. So I'm going even darker now with some ultramarine and burnt sienna. And creating little connections between all these areas and all these shapes, connecting all my darks together as well. And there's another little hedgerow that comes out at an angle down there. Again, very simply suggested. Lots of little dry brush marks as well. Let's bring in a little bit of water with the mist bottle. Let's get some texture across the land as well. Drag some of that paint down as well, tease it out from the paint that I've already put in. Let's bring some little marks everywhere, basically tying it all together. Need a bit more dark in that row of trees on the left there. Now, like I said, not looking to paint individual trees or anything like that. It's all just a series of dark shapes. Some more dry brush across the field. Dry brush, an extremely useful tool really for painting 1,000 little marks with hardly doing anything at all. Now just picked up a smaller brush and I think I'll drop a couple of birds into the sky, give the painting and just a couple of little hard edges and gives it all a little bit of context. And it's dry there. I did put a little bit of water on with the bottle, but I think I can get away with laying a bird in. So a really simple little bird shape. Let's lay another smaller one a little bit further away. And let's do one more. Let's put one up above this cloud. Make this one slightly larger, so it look like it's a little bit closer to us. I think that's enough to bring the painting together. So that's the finished painting. Very simple, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what you can do with a graded wash. Bring it down over the whole sheet, blend the colours together as seamlessly as possible, leaving little highlight areas and a few little areas for wispy clouds and things up in the sky. And then allow that to dry ever so slightly. Don't dry it off completely. And then lay a dark cloud over the top of that if you want, and then that gives a nice little bit of impact, a little bit of drama. And then treat everything in the land as a simple series of shapes, little silhouettes, and I think that's more than enough to really tell the story and to create the impression that there's loads of trees and bushes going on down there. And then finally I just brought it all together, a little focal point of a few birds, and that's enough to bring the painting together, tell a very simple little story really of a park in the evening time, but quite evocative I think. But anyway, I hope you liked that. If you did, then give the video a like, send me a comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Also check me out over on Patreon, where I've got an exclusive video over there every week. But anyway, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.